Well, this is really an honor for me to be able to introduce Christopher to you. I have known Christopher for about 14 years. I've been lucky enough to have him in my life for almost 12 of those 14. And we've had a lot of adventures together. I can tell you that he is an adventurer. He is a laugher. He will make you laugh, and then he will laugh at the things he said that made you laugh. We have a lot of laughing fests at our house. He is a movie lover. He is a man that went to film school before he went on to study the literary arts. So we watch a lot of movies, and I get the inside scoop, which is really fun. He is a lover of people, all people. Anytime he can have a conversation with another human being, it sort of lifts him off the ground. He's a giver. He loves to spend time with people who are interested in writing and in art and in loving life and in loving one another. He's my best friend. He's the man that I married when both of us said, we'll probably never ever get married again. Look what happened. And it's such an honor to introduce him here tonight with some of his accomplishments. Christopher is a poet, editor, teacher, and artist from New York. We have that in common. Luna served as the first poet laureate of Clark County from 2013 to 2017. He has an MFA from Naropa University and the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. He's the co-founder with me of Printed Matter Vancouver, an editing service and small press for Northwest writers. He founded Ghost Town Poetry Open Mic in November of 2004, so it's been around for those 14 years I was talking about. I think I came to the second poetry reading when you founded this. I think that's, I can remember back, and it was at Ice Cream Renaissance. His books include Brutal Glints of Moonlight and The Flame Is Ours, the letters of Stan Brakhage, who's an experimental filmmaker, and Michael McClure, who is a poet, 1961 to 78. In 2019, Utter Chaos Press in Eugene will release a revised and expanded edition of Christopher's Ghost Town, USA. It's a decade-long investigative poem about Vancouver, Washington. And the name Ghost Town, for those of you who don't know, was how this New Yorker felt about being in Vancouver when he'd walk down the streets and nobody would be there. And he said, this place is a ghost town. And that's how that stuck around. I am so proud of you and all that you do, and so happy to introduce you to everybody who already knows you. Christopher, come on up.
Channel Z, circa 1989. Suddenly static in my own time, in your own time, beware, a tear can appear, a rip, a slash through the static in a moment, and suddenly, too suddenly, you are not wherever you are, but then again. And there may be no reason why, but there you are in the lavender shorts, the garment that stuck around, not wanting to miss a moment of this crisis, this chaos, this crisis of faith, this fundamental fissure in the unseen scripture you rarely regarded as worth your time. That time, static, that age, static in my attic, laughs in a darkened kitchen, and you did not then, and you do not now believe, do not believe, do not believe in anything but love. It's a good poem to warm up with, so that's why I started there. but this is the first poem in the book. And one of the reasons that it's the first poem in the book is it's something that sort of percolated for a really long time. I think it took about 10 years for me to actually put this into words because I was putting it together in my head. And it's a kind of a manifesto, and it'll be a way for certain people to know what to expect in the rest of the book, I suppose. And the title comes from Jack Spicer. All beauty is at continuous war with God. You've got it all wrong. Whatever it is cannot be labeled, cornered, captured, or caged. Its power comes from the mystery. Its beauty, the direct result of its ineffability. Not knowing is the secret. Not needing to know is the key. Realizing that the answer is unattainable and ought to remain that way. You fuck things up when you try to place it in a box, erect palaces, build altars, put it on display for all the world to see, the glory in captivity. It's not over yet, sorry. And actually, it's in 2 parts. Here's part 2. Not knowing can be painful, but it feels more honest. Rather be in the dark with hope than standing in the light, nothing left to learn. My disappointment is boundless. Your pretty words would be easier to swallow were they not so often followed by the gleeful slitting of your brother's throat. What, I ask you, has any of this to do with love? So that's, for certain people, that's how they'll know this book is not for them, and for everybody else, have fun. Here we go. Magic happens when you least expect it. So this is page 5, and the first time, I think, in the book where we really, and almost right away, where we start bringing in material from other people. There's a lot of found material in the book. Magic happens when you least expect it. Nursery rhymes from the gods, all-you-can-eat porn, busy signal blues, minute particular speculum. We all suffer from a certain crisis, a thick beauty, but it is pure sound and much nonsense, I think. Don't salivate all over my hard-won, preconceived notion. 'Tis a trigger I own, epiphany at every step. Pretty amazing what can happen when you organize your data. Daydreaming about sending pictures through the sky, strung out on life, strung out on your old lady, or strung out on whatever. Every man prays in his own language. There is no language that God does not understand. I get the majority of my news today from librarians and poets. I'm a punk, that's what I do. More magic, and I've been working on this for a really long time, but it didn't occur to me until just now how much that word appears in this book. Magic taken seriously. This is definitely a Ghost Town poem. This one will probably be in the Ghost Town book as well. Magic taken seriously. An invisible sigil passed on like a secret amulet from a school teacher to a lion caged, yet keeping one eye fixed on the door. Worry not, their time is swiftly drawn to a close. The crow's gate is trailed by a lingering nimbus, the afterimage of a hypnagogic dream, deferred, let go, forgotten, like a mental grocery list left behind in a rusty old filing cabinet. There is a folder labeled wishes, filled to overflowing. Frayed bits of ideas fold out like withered petals. The rubber band that once held it all together, crusted, long since snapped, limp, collecting dust in an aluminum coffin. In need of a personal secretary or a French maid to dust out the static and the habit-forming poison of lies repeated often enough to begin to resemble truth. The collector paces in circles like monk before the piano, unable to put a single film in the can, or part with the spiral notebooks containing conjugated verbs from Mr. Samperi's 7th grade Italian class. Cave wall, picnic table, province of those who find it difficult to believe that any of us are here at all. How arrogant to presume that it is possible to leave anything behind. This anxiety returns us to the first and last question. If all is connected, what is the nature of the thread? If energy never dies but is transformed, from where or whom or what does the transmission originate? Furthermore, if you knew the answer, would it change anything? Would your dream be worth remembering? Would your cabinet be filled again? Would you be lucid enough to take control and begin anew? I'm remembering now as I read that This was before I realized that I had sleep apnea. So I was at a park here in Vancouver. It's great how many parks there are here in town, watching some small children, and it was my job, one of them was my son, to make sure that they didn't die or nothing terrible happened to them. And, like phasing in and out of consciousness, which I know some of you know is a really fruitful time for poetry, but, I'm glad that they weren't snatched or murdered or whatever, because I couldn't, and now I wear a mask and everything's good. But at that point, I didn't even know what it was yet. So among the things that Tony had done for me was to let me know that she was, she couldn't sleep. She was terrified because I kept stopping breathing, and so we took care of it. Burnt retina. Joseph Campbell and John Cage sat on a toadstool discussing dreams, parsing out the pattern in the scarf around Joe's neck. Electric wire choking the life out of a tree limb. It was as if they had stared into each other's eyes forever. The larger and smaller friend eschewed the street, preferring charcoal to the sinister marsh. John poured mushroom tea into his eye socket. Little was said. John Cage was a very talented mushroom hunter. Ever since the first time, I've needed a fistful. Can I have 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, please? God, I just went blank. Fell silent in the spot where they left the tea strainer. The day John Cage died, I heard a cough in the wood. Found a mushroom cap, a very personal column. Wept for you, for me. You lean forward, tip a cap toward me, glimmer, open for me. I fall into the inverted lotus, crawl forward into the stem, diminishing as I go. Sod between my fingers, dew on my back. Insects ascend the stalks, beginning at my ankles. I roll, tumble, and land on my back. Eyes assaulted by sunlight, dissipating into clouds which resemble your spinning petals. Blossom embossed upon my fluttering eyelids as I am pulled into the earth. My return complete, one with the sod, worm food, finished, done for, replenished, a seed at the beginning and end of a long familiar story. So I think I've been telling people that the oldest poem that I could find in this was around 1999. And now I'm realizing that this one here may be older than that, at least what's being described here. This is people, places, and things from my time at the Kerouac School in Boulder, and that experience really changed my life, and I really wouldn't be here. None of any of this that's happening would be happening without the Kerouac School. These words do not belong to us. So as you might imagine, it's a poem for poets. There are a lot of those in here. These words do not belong to us. Knee-deep in Berrigan, I may never emerge from the fool's wisdom of the permission he allowed. Dear Todd, it's 4:22 a.m. Where you been? Where are you? And where did you go? After your vision of my yet-to-be-conceived son, after you used the condom you borrowed one delirious night in Boulder, was it worth it? Did she like it? And why, I asked, do poets make such lousy letter writers? Dear Smoller, sincerity is a lifestyle stripped of sentiment. Green instructed me to start by removing the cliches from my life. You suggested refusing to pay student loans on principle. Ed Sanders took one horrified look at my bulging sesh and gently recommended that I scale it back. When awake, each moment is a glorious, potentially transformative, high-energy construct that opens slowly, deliberately, like the lotus petals of a woman's vulva, as we stand in awe, scribbling furiously, hoping to get it all down, needing to get it right, damn it. Heightened projections, aestheticized representations of pure bliss consciousness, captured by devoted scribes with a hard-on for linguistic photorealism. My friend Matt Megan is here, who was in many of those classes. And Matt, didn't you audit classes at the Kerouac School for like 10 years before you were actually a student there, something like that?
Then they graduated me.
Yeah, so I think at one point they just made you become a student, right? They said, this is bullshit, you have to actually take these for real now.
It was the day before graduation.
Yeah. So Matt, one of my dearest friends, one of the people who was there, were you in the Blake class? Because that was one of the great classes there. Blake class.
Yeah.
You probably need a class for someone like William Blake, so that's one of the things that happened to me at the Kerouac School I'm really glad about. And Ginsberg, who started it, and the person who's the reason that I'm a poet, you know, Blake is sort of in his lineage. Blake was really important to him, so. Okay. I have a big mouth. I like to talk. I enjoy hearing myself talk. So I said to myself, don't talk, just go up and read. But I feel like now enough reading has happened that I can just take a moment to take this in and breathe and maybe say something, and Tony or Mike can throw something at me if it goes on too long. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's here and everybody here who has supported me for so long. And you know, this is a big milestone for me, and it was a long time coming, and it was actually basically in the can. It was basically ready to go, or close to it, before the Poet Laureate thing happened for me, and so that delayed things somewhat. But there was a time period while I was a Poet Laureate where somebody accepted it and then rejected it. So, and this was really fucked up. I'm sharing this because there are other poets in the room, so be ready for this kind of heartbreak in your life. I found a great press. I solicited them because I think they're amazing and I thought my book would be perfect for them. And they accepted not one, but 2 manuscripts from me, and then decided that they weren't going to do either one of the 2 manuscripts, and never really told me why. I was never really given a reason why. And that happened while I was still doing all the things I was doing as Poet Laureate. So when the Poet Laureate thing ended, one of the agreements that Tony and I made was, as soon as I was no longer officially doing that, I would work really hard on getting these two, there's actually 3 of them, but to try to get these manuscripts out into the world. So this got accepted, and then, and this all happened in the same month, January of this year. This got accepted in the expanded version of Ghost Town, the 10-year rather than the 4-year version of it, got accepted in January, and that'll come out sometime next year. So anyway, I want to say thank you to all the people who volunteered to help to make this a little bit less chaotic. We've been chaotic since 2004, but we just really didn't want it to be chaotic in that bad way where people get pissed off. We haven't pissed off too many people, not as many as you would expect for how long we've been here. Yeah, guys, try harder to piss them off. Just don't piss off Leah because it's great that she has this here. Okay, so this is another one of those collage poems, and this is probably one of the earlier ones. And sometimes I tell people who's in them, but some of the poems in this book, there's so many people that are in them that goes on for a while. But this one just has stuff from 3 people, so I'm going to mention them. Peter Matheson is in here, Miles Davis, and Charles Olson. I remember there was this is the title, okay? I remember there was a big lightning storm, lit up the night sky all over Nebraska, and it seemed like some kind of sign that nobody knew how to read. We're all stewards of our own trip. It's a room that's possessed. If all my life and my being were judged by a few incidents, it would rightly be determined that I was a complete imbecile. It's about zooming in and finding heaven underneath your kitchen table. They say Mozart had worms. Trichinosis, man. I'm going to call myself on the phone one day and tell myself to shut up. The elephant moves easily through any trees. He is Ganesh. Apparently, this prophylactic was meant for another. On the other hand, the report claims that Marlon Brando was among those present, which Peltier says is simply not true. There are notes to tell you who said what. There aren't notes to tell you what the fuck that means. You gotta figure out yourself. Sometimes I know and sometimes I don't, to be honest with you. So the thing is, I'm like compulsively catching things from the air. When I was talking about that permission from Berrigan, that's one of the things I got from Ted Berrigan, is that the material comes from everywhere and can come from anywhere. And so that really released me to be this kind of magpie that I sort of already was, and the film school thing was part of it. The thing I really took to in film school was editing. I really like arranging and putting things together. So this is just using words. And I think when people hear about it, they think I'm doing like a cento, which is a cento is you take all of your words from a poem and make another poem out of it. It's a little bit more complex than that because the material can come from any place, music, overheard conversation, things people say at the mic when they're really nervous. It can come from any place, basically. And then the trick is arranging and rearranging to find that sweet spot so that it sounds like me, or that it says something that I could have said. And that means that it takes a lot longer to finish these collage poems than anything else I do. Sometimes 13 to 20 versions before you find that sweet spot that you want. And this is called The Gleaner and I. There's a film that Agnes Varda made that's about the artist magpie thing that you should see. And I think I got the title wrong. I think she calls it The Gleaners and I. So I really recommend that. And so this is sort of about all that stuff I was talking about. The Gleaner and I. The soprano was a computer. Nothing but a cute little ruin. He never grew up. The world grew up around him. His old man was a nihilist, a real perv. Tried to balance the streaks, nurtured it like a serpent to his breast. Didn't understand why I swallowed the transistor. I do like flowers and say odd things. I think it was everyone's opinion that this was a mistake that can be stopped and turned around. The world grew up around him and buried him. Tomorrow, the discomfort index will be quite high. Some real Daniel Day-Lewis type of shit. Now you will be writing a poem for the first time in your life. Like flowers and say odd things. Live your life like a line of poetry written with a splash of blood. A world of pure potential. So I have two more for this set, and then we'll sell some books. And if you're here and with us for the second set and the feature that I'm going to do at 9:30, I just want you to know that I don't think I'm repeating anything. I may repeat one, but it's going to be all different stuff. This is called Too Cute to Kill, and this is where my mom comes in. My mom was the kind of mom where if I was writing in my journal growing up, she would always say, "Oh, you're writing about your mother?" You know, so that I would lie and say yes. But the thing is, I was a teenager, so if I was actually writing about my mother, at the moment she said that, I was usually like writing hateful shit about her, you know? But anyway, flash forward many years, I've done these different things, she's very proud, and so this title comes from something that she said about me. Too cute to kill. He's a questioning motherfucker, in the moment, chewing on the divine, as if the state were out to destroy the subjective in each of us. But there's a monster in his mind, looking for a real big woman to make love to. The world is a very puzzling place. The government took all his clothes. Flagrant, sneaky, subterfuge. Still, he beat it. Beat it the hard way, man. With the Rosicrucian thing. My dad is not a villain. He's just an asshole. Like an East Coast backwoodsman, perpetuating the myth that to look is to know. I love when poets get up and say the following. And that was a true story. That's not really true about this poem, but there's enough that's true that I could get away with saying that. And of course, when a poet says, and that was a true story, you don't know. They could be lying. I encourage poets to lie because people think that only fiction writers are allowed to lie. And of course, poets can do it too. And of course, poets are doing it all the time anyway, whether they're admitting it or not. So some of the people that are in there besides my mom, Livia Montana, who is here now. Thank you, Livia. Livia said chewing on the divine, which is beautiful. Lawrence Ferlinghetti in here. Some dialogue from an anime series. And Noam Chomsky is in there. Some more people. Sly Stone is in there. Dialogue from the film Anatomy of a Murder. Charles Mingus talking about Sonny Rollins. A person on the street interviewed for Humans of New York. And Jalen Chapman. She's a poet who's out there at Naropa. Okay, so I'm going to finish with this one that really is, this is definitely one of those things. It's written for and about my fellow poets. Welcome to life, motherfucker. I should say it with a little more enthusiasm. Welcome to life, motherfucker. Appalled by the enormity of my self-regard, there's got to be more to this tradition of transmission than elitism and intellectual circle jerk. The tyranny of intentionality, visions of a glamorous hell with bags full of havoc. Like Bobby and Joni walking the festival grounds, cracking a bullwhip, superstars in our thinking. Where you swim, she drowns. The whole impossibility of actually seeing something. I think that now that's a very difficult process to navigate. There's so much to cut through. It's a very complicated terrain. The solid marrying the liquid, that curious lurking something. It's up to us to find their breath in the fog. To quietly float is a huge challenge. To get people to use their eyes and to get them to notice the things they don't pay attention to. Everybody does look. It's just a question of how hard. Williams modeled brevity and precision. Duncan invited us to return to the field. Ginsberg recommended candor. Nikki reminded us to stand up. I am constantly, voraciously reading medical texts until 4 or 5 in the morning. I want more energy. I want more vitality. I want more hair. I want to snuff around and eavesdrop on people. I want to go further, transcending time. Life breaks all of us. Capitalism enters our central nervous system and gives us many levels of sickness. The antidote, spermy poetic language, explosive and ejaculatory, a new way to communicate, to participate, a new spiritual condition. If you're open to infinity, you have a chance to regenerate yourself. And once all these circles, these circular temples regenerate themselves, they're the same old world, but with a fresh new morning exhalation. I'll always be your friend and even your poet laureate. I am not a revolutionary, yet I feel I have something of value to say. I do overshare. It's my way of trying to understand myself. It creates community when you talk about private things. It's sort of a hobby of mine, the truth. The truth is not needed, but something is. I have spent eons sitting here, right here. I have been to hell and back, and let me tell you, it was wonderful. One moment equals eternity. That tranquility is right at the edge of chaos. Words are sigils for the unutterable, incomprehensible, ineffable energy coursing through all life forms, poetic pictograms, guttural grunts toward meaning, phenomenological symbology, grand, and finally, inadequate. Welcome to life, motherfucker. Thank you. If you like that there's more of the same and more different too.